welcome to this quick little half-an-hour segment on the Postman API platform. And my name is Vivek. I'm an engineering manager at Postman. I work with the monitoring and documentation teams. So if you also have questions specific to either of those two, feel free to just find me on Hopin, anytime today, anytime tomorrow, and we can talk about that. But for the next half an hour, we're going to talk very specifically about the Postman API platform. So this isn't going to cover the entire platform. Instead, we won't be able to do that in half an hour, if I'm being honest. So we're going to cover one user journey, and we're going to cover two of the more advanced topics, one being mock servers and the other being monitors. And we'll start with some of the more basic things like the Postman interface and just sending a request, organizing them into collections, working with variables, etc. And just so we have a story we can sort of follow through, we'll have Neil, and we'll be following his journey in creating a new app explorer. And in order to do this, he's going to be interacting with the NASA API. So he's also going to have, this is Postman's most famous employee, by the way. This is Cooper. You've probably seen him on our website. You've probably heard about him in Ankit's keynote, like I think 15 minutes ago. So Cooper's going to help us. He's going to walk us through some of the features of the app. He's going to help Neil set up his application. And while we do that, we're going to learn a little bit about the different capabilities that the Postman API platform offers us. So let's get started. Let's open up the Postman app. And once you open it up, this is the view that you'll be getting now with version 8 of the app rolling out and our web version also rolling out. The first thing you're going to see is the home view. And this is a great place to see an overview of what your team has been up to. And it's also a great place to pick up where you left off. If you were working on something yesterday, you're coming back and you want to continue working on that. So on the right-hand side, you can see the activity feed. This is it's just a chronological list of what your teammates have been up to. And there are also some other sections that aren't visible right now, but you'll also see a recent workspaces section. So if you have a few workspaces you work very frequently with, you can just, with a single click, be back in that workspace. And speaking of workspaces, we are going to be working within a workspace today. So let's go ahead and switch to a workspace. We're going to go to this workspace dropdown in the top left. And once we open it, we're going to see a list of all of the workspaces that we have access to within our team. So we're going to click on my workspace for now. And I haven't done anything in this workspace yet, so it's pretty empty. But we're going to fix that in the next 20 minutes or so. So a workspace is a great place to just work, to focus on work within a specific context. So if you're working with a few folks on a side project and you have APIs that you're interacting with, you want to track that work in this one place, you just create a workspace for it, invite all the folks you're working with, and your collections, your requests, your mock servers, monitors, everything else you do, it's going to be available in this one space. So let's start by setting our first request. We're going to be interacting with the NASA API. So let's create a new tab, which we can use to build our new request. Sorry, let me just go back for a second. We're going to do that by clicking this little plus button in the top within our tab bar. And when we do that, every time we do that, it's going to open a new tab with it's essentially a blank slate, which we can use to build whatever request we want to send. In this case, this is where we would go off and look at the API documentation. We'd figure out which endpoints we want to interact with. And we would use that information to build a request within this tab. So let's say we did that for the NASA API. We went and we found this endpoint that we want to work with. We just want to see how it works. And all we really know is, okay, planetary apod, not sure what that does yet. Let's try sending the request. So we've entered the URL, we've configured anything else that we need to configure, and we're going to hit the send button. And when we get the response, it's going to show up in the bottom pane, and we can see, okay, it seems like it's returning the astronomy picture of the day. Perfect. So now we know how this request actually works. We know what the response structure looks like. And we can go ahead and keep doing this for different requests that we're seeing within the NASA API. So eventually we'd have a bunch of tabs open as we're playing around with various requests. And this can get kind of unwieldy after a while. If you used Chrome, then you would know you might get like 20, 30 tabs open, and it's really difficult to find something that you're actually looking for. So let's say you sent a request yesterday or the day before. You probably closed your app by then. You probably closed the tabs you were working with. How do you go back and actually look at what you were doing a couple of days ago? It's actually relatively easy to do. We're gonna jump to the history section, which you can see on the left side here. This left navigation is what lets us navigate between all of the major sections within the Postman application. So once we click on history, that's going to change the sidebar, and we can see a list of all the requests that we've sent in the past. And this is just listed chronologically, so you can go back to yesterday, you can go back to last week, and you can click on that request to open that specific instance of that request. And what I mean by specific instance is that you would also see the response that you received at that point in time. So this is a great way to, one, go back and look at work you might have done in the past, but it's also a great way to look at how a particular API endpoint might have evolved over time. Like if you're building an API endpoint and you want to see what was the response 3 days ago when we were still developing it, you can go ahead and do that. Of course, it's still kind of tough. It's kind of difficult to find a specific request because you're looking directly at URLs. So it'd be nice if there was some way for us to name these individual requests and keep them somewhere so that we can go back to it. So that's what we'll look at next. We'll look at how do we save this request so that we can reuse it for monitoring, for mocking, or for just sharing it with teammates. So to do that, let's go back to the collection section. We're going to click on this item in the main navigation, and that brings us to the collection listing in the sidebar. Since this is a fresh workspace, I haven't created any collections yet, so I have nothing here. But I can fix that either by clicking on this Create a New Collection CTA in the sidebar, or I can also click the little plus button you can see at the top of the sidebar. Either way, when I click it, it's going to open a new tab, and we'll have this blank collection that's been created for us. Now, we're looking at the NASA API, so we can go ahead and name this collection, NASA API. We'll just do that. Boom. So we named it NASA API. We added a little description so that we have some documentation. And now if we share this collection with someone else on our team, or even if we publish it to the entire world, everyone understands, okay, this is why this collection exists. You can add information about how to use this collection, any other bits and pieces of information you want to add. And it makes it really easy to consume that collection when you're sharing it. But the collection we have right now is empty. It doesn't have any requests in it. So let's fix that as well. We're going to click on this tab, and we'll go back to the request that we had sent at the very beginning. And what we're going to do is we're going to save this request now. We'll click the little save button you can see on the top right. And when you click that, you'll get this save request modal. And what this lets us do is actually, first of all, it lets us name the request. So we can call it something like get the picture of the day instead of HTTPS API nasa.gov, which isn't really consumable. And it also lets us add a description. This is where you start documenting the API that you're actually interacting with. You can add information that makes it easier for you to work with it. You can add information that makes it easier to, when you share the collection, for other people to work with it. And once you've done that, you can select the collection you want to save this into, and you just hit save, and that's it, you're done. So the request has now shown up in the left sidebar. The tab that we had open now the title has changed to get image of the day, which is what we named our request. And we'll just go ahead and do the exact same thing for all of the other requests that we were exploring within the NASA API. So once we do that, this is what our collection is going to look like. We have a request that we can just click on it and we can get Mars rover photos. We can click on another one. We can get a list of confirmed planets. And this is a lot easier after you've explored the API, if you don't want to keep typing the URL every single time. But it also means that your collection is going to grow over time. And I've seen collections which have hundreds of requests, which have thousands of requests, and you don't generally want to scan the collection top to bottom, like when you're looking for a specific request. So we can add some level of organization to this on top of what we already have. And we can do that using folders. So you can create folders within your collection to either group requests together, or you can actually nest folders to get multiple levels of organization. And it probably doesn't seem very impressive with this particular collection because we only had 6 requests to start off with. But when you're dealing with like a 300 request collection, having a few folders to help you find the request you're looking for actually comes in handy. So now we have more or less a relatively well-formed collection, but we can still make it a little bit better, because building stuff is generally not where the work ends. You also have to maintain what you're building. And what we've built so far is not the easiest thing to maintain, because we have the URL that is repeating across all of the different requests. We have the API key, which is also repeating all of the different requests. If I were to share this collection with one of my teammates, they would have to now go and change every single request, update the API key in order to make these API calls from their account. So let's see if we can solve that problem, the maintainability and reusability problem, using Postman Variables. In this particular case, we're going to use an environment to contain the variables that we're working with. You can also have variables in other contexts, but that's something we can look into later. So for now, let's head over to the environment section here. And we're going to create an environment pretty much the same way we created a collection. We can either click on create a new environment, or we can click on the little plus at the top left of the sidebar. Once we click that, we get this new tab with an empty environment where we can name the environment and we can start adding the different variables that we want to work with. So for this example, we're just going to add 2. We're going to add a URL, which is the base URL of the NASA API. And we're going to add an API key variable, which is the API key that represents our identity when we're interacting with the API. And an interesting thing to note here is that you'll notice there are 2 columns. There's an initial value column and a current value column. The reason for that is because Postman it's a collaborative platform. You want to work with other people, but at the same time, you don't always want to share everything with everyone else. Like, I wouldn't want to share my password. I definitely don't want to share my API key with anyone else. And that's where these 2 columns become helpful. The initial value is the value within the environment that's actually shared with other folks. So if I share this environment with someone else, they would see the initial value of the URL as api.nasa.gov. But for API key, they would see nothing. It would just be empty for them. And that's because the current value column is purely local storage. That whatever is in there doesn't leave your system at all, which means my API key, which in this case is just demo key, it's never going to leave my system. And it helps me sleep at night knowing that that's the case. So now we have this environment. Let's actually start using it within our request so that we're able to solve the reusability problem that we were talking about earlier. So let's click on this tab and let's head back to the request that we had saved earlier. And you'll see that we can replace the variable parts of the URL, of the URL using double curly braces. And what this tells Postman is that these are the variable parts of this particular field. And you can do the same thing for headers. You can do it within authorization. It's slightly different in test scripts, but I think we'll cover that towards the end via documentation. But what you'll notice is the color of the double curly brace URL part and the double curly brace API key part, they're both red. And what Postman is telling us is that, hey, I see that you want to use a variable, but I have no idea what value you want to put in there yet. So we're going to fix that actually by setting the active environment. There's a dropdown at the top right, which lets you choose the environment. And we're going to change that to NASA API production. This is the environment we had created earlier. And now that we've marked that as the active environment, Postman's like, okay, cool, I get it. You want me to replace URL with the URL from this environment. So URL has now changed color to orange, and so has API key. Now when we send this request, Postman's actually going to replace these values and then send the request. So if we go ahead and do this for every single one of our requests, or if we build our request that way in the first place, that means if I want to change my API key, I just change it in one place. If I want a production API key, a test API key, a development API key, I just have to switch through environments and it'll just work, right? So if I hover on any one of these highlighted values, it'll actually show me the value that will get substituted when I'm sending the request, and it'll show me where that value is coming from. In this case, it's coming from the environment, which is why it says the scope is environment. So now we have this collection that represents all of the API endpoints we want to interact with. We've made it reusable to a certain extent, and we kind of added some safety as well because our API key can't accidentally be shared because it never leaves our system. So now we've explored the API, we kind of understand it, we can start working it into our code, which is, well, that's a bit of a gap to bridge because until now we've been working with a graphical user interface, now we're switching to code. But the good news is Postman can actually help with that transition as well. And it does that by providing a code generation functionality. If you head to the context bar, which you see on the right-hand side of the user interface, you'll see there's an option here. The third icon here is a little code icon. And if I click on that, the context bar opens and I can see, okay, so Postman's already generated a little snippet for me using JavaScript fetch syntax. And I can click on that dropdown, I can go choose other language options, etc. And I can just copy this code into my application and maybe tweak it a little bit so that it fits in. But most of the work is actually done to send this particular request from my code base. So with that, Neil now has pretty much everything he needs. He's understood the API, he knows how to get it into his code base, and he's pretty much set up to build his application. So cool, Neil is done. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't just stop with building something. There's a continuous process that goes along with it. So what's the next step for us? Well, the next step is while you're developing, there are certain issues you might face, which Postman can also help you with. And one of the common issues when you're working with free APIs or even paid APIs is that you'll have either a rate limit or a usage quota, or you might have both. And when you're developing, your focus is going to be on iteration. You're going to want to try changes again and again, so you'll end up calling the API quite a bit. And if you run into the rate limit, that kind of gets in the way of your workflow. So we can actually solve this problem using something called mock servers, which is something that Postman offers. And let's see how we would end up doing that. So we had this request that we saved earlier, but in order to mock the response, we need to save the response first. And we'll go ahead and click on this little save response CTA, which you see at the top of the response pane. And when you click on it, you'll get the option to either save it to a file, or you can save as an example. For this example, we're going to choose save as example. And when you click on that, the interface changes slightly, and you'll see that now you've actually created an example and you're editing the example itself. So here you can see the exact request and the exact response that the API would respond with if this specific request was to come in. So we're going to save this. We'll say it's whatever the API responds with when it's a 200 OK. And we're good to go. We have that API response saved. And we're all set to create our mock server. So let's go ahead and create a mock server from this particular collection. To do that, we're going to go to the collection in the sidebar. And when you hover on a collection, you'll notice a little kebab menu pops up on the right-hand side, something like that. And when you click that kebab menu, you'll get a whole bunch of options with stuff you can do with this collection. We're going to click on this mock collection option that shows up here. And when you click it, a new tab opens up with a new mock server that you can create. So since we came from the collection sidebar, the collection is going to be pre-selected, the version is going to be pre-selected, and we can go ahead and give our mock server a name. We can also choose the environment that we've built to work with this particular request or with this collection. And once we've configured the mock server to behave the way we want it to, we can just create the mock server by clicking the CTA here. So with that, we now have a mock server where if we hit this particular URL and we hit the route that we had configured earlier for that request, we would get the response that we had saved. So we don't need to hit the actual API anymore and worry about rate limits. We can hit this API. So how do we actually go about doing that? Well, we're going to copy this mock URL first because this is essentially our new server. It's our development server. So we'll just click on copy mock URL, and we're going to go back to the request, and we'll open this. You'll see this little eye icon right next to the environment dropdown. If you click that, you'll see a preview of the currently selected environment. And within this preview, we're going to update the current value of the URL variable from api.nasa.gov to the URL of the mock server that we just copied. So that's what it looks like once we're done. And what this means is now when I send a request within this collection, the URL variable is going to be replaced with the mock server base URL instead of the actual NASA API URL. So while we're developing, we can actually just work with this. I can use the same thing in my code while I'm working locally. I can do the same thing on beta, et cetera. And when I know, okay, my functionality is the way I want it to be, I can go ahead and just swap it out with the actual URL, which is api.nasa.gov. So that's mock servers. That gets rid of any headaches you might have around usage quotas or rate limits, or even cost. In some cases, it can save you a whole bunch of money. So cool. Now, with that out of the way, we're done with our development. We've built our application, or I should say, Neil has built his application. And as usual, once you push something out, you'll notice, uh-oh, something isn't working quite the way I expected it to. And it might be because of a problem within your own API, or it might be a problem in an API you consume. So how do we make sure that we catch these problems before our users have to come and report that problem to us? Ideally, we should identify the problem, we should resolve it before a user even notices that something is wrong, right? So we can actually do that using Postman Monitors. And we're going to write a quick little test, and we're going to automate the execution of that test using a Postman Monitor. So let's go back to the app. And this is the request that we're guessing was erroring out. So we're going to add a test to this particular request. And we'll just click on the test tab here. And once you click on it, you will see a little code editor pop up. And we're going to add a very simple test right now, which is we just want to know if the response code is a 200. If it's anything else, then we're not happy with it. If it's a 200, then everything is working as expected. And I can now send this request, it'll run the test and tell me if the test passed or succeeded. But I don't want to be manually sending this request every single day or every hour. I want that to happen automatically. And I want Postman to let me know when something is wrong so I can go and fix it. And that's where monitors come into the picture. So we can take this same collection that we've been building so far, and we can actually just create a monitor right on that same collection. The same way we created a mock server, we're going to hover on the collection. We're going to click on the little kebab menu. But this time, we're going to click on this monitor collection option. And when we click on that, predictably, a tab opens up with a little form that lets you configure the monitor that you want to create. So because we came from the collection sidebar, the collection is already going to be selected. The version tag is already going to be selected. We're going to name our monitor something that tells us, hey, this is what this monitor is doing. And we'll also choose the environment that we had created earlier. Because remember, like the URL, the API key, that's within your environment. If you just run the collection, it's not going to work because you'll be trying to hit double curly brace URL, which doesn't exist. And once we have the environment selected, we're also going to choose a frequency to run this monitor at. So in this screen, it shows every day at 6 p.m. But you could also choose every 5 minutes, every hour, once a week on Saturday at 7 a.m. Whatever really fits your use case, you can go ahead and choose that. It also offers multiple regions, some notification controls, some integrations, etc. But I think we'll probably run out of time if we also try to cover those. So for now, let's go ahead and create this particular monitor. We'll just click create, and now we have an automated system that's going to keep an eye on this API that's critical to our business. And we can see that, okay, the test that we had for the status code, it did indeed fail. And we were expecting a 200, but we ended up getting a 403. So now I know what I need to go and fix. I need to figure out why I'm getting a 403. I need to go and fix that. And when I run this monitor again, it'll pass and my application is going to work just fine. And this way, when something breaks, the system is reaching out to me and telling me, hey, you need to go fix this, instead of me constantly being worried about, oh, is my API still functioning, right? Cool. So we covered quite a few things. We covered API monitoring. We covered mocking during development. We covered organizing requests, folders, variables, a whole bunch of things. But we've really only touched the very tip of what Postman is capable of. If you want to learn more about the advanced features that Postman has, we have a learning center at learning.postman.com. We try to keep it up to date, and we make sure that everything that anyone will want to learn about Postman, it's all documented there. And if you don't have a Postman account already, it's free. You can go sign up at postman.com. And yeah, I believe that's it.
All right. 29 minutes almost on the dot, just like he called it. All right, guys. Thanks, everyone, for hopping in the chat. Like Hake said, we are going to try to make this presentation available. I know a lot of people wanted to read it, and I'm sorry, Hopin has a limited view range for us. We couldn't do too much there, but we will try to get this in your hands so you can rewatch it, because that was great. Vivek, you're too smooth. We got a lot of good questions in Slido, so I think we can kind of start with the top. If you guys don't have to run anywhere, I can hang around. I think, Vivek, can you hang around for a little bit and go through some of these?
Yep, of course. I think people want to meet the cats as well.
Yeah. That's my question. What's the kitties' names?
So there are two cats here. One of them was, nice and calm and sleeping. He just went back to sleep, actually. His name is Kibe. And the other one is Piroshki. I'm not sure. Oh, there she is. So that's Piroshki. They're both named after food, exotic foods that I can think of. So she's the one that's been running around asking for attention. Like, hey, why are you looking at this rectangle of light when I'm around? Now she's all calm, All
right. Awesome. Great. We met the cats. All right, let's go top down on these questions. We got some upvotes here. So I think first one from Jared is, how do we get the new client? The update says I already have the latest.
So if you're using the web version, which is available to everyone, then you don't really need to worry about updates. And I believe we're still in the process of rolling out version 8.0. So if you really want the new interface, please use the version in the browser, and that'll be up to date like all the time.
Yeah, and the web version is working super, super clean.
Oh yeah, it's buttery smooth.
We have made amazing progress on that within just even the last couple of months. So really highly recommend that. Next question on that, let's go with Adams. Can I handle different authentication using environments, e.g. basic auth for system 1 and then Oauth 2 for system 2, but all handled by the environment?
That would be tricky because environments aren't really meant for that specific purpose. The authentication mechanism itself is a property of the request. It's more like environments let you control what you put in there. So I think the example I gave was about different environments. If you have, when I say environment in this context, what I mean is like dev environment versus beta versus production. You might have different keys for calling those APIs. So environments are perfect for those. If you want to use different auth methods, I'd have to think about that one. I'm pretty sure you'd have to create multiple requests and then maybe do some scripting magic to switch between the two, which is also possible.
Yeah, maybe something you want to follow up and ping on after.
Yeah,
you can probably answer in more detail. Let's go with Michael's, and then we'll go back up to Aaron's. Just want to make sure we touch on that, which is, I think this is a great question just for kind of high-level best practices. When would you want to create a new workspace?
Well, it's a very tricky question because you don't want to end up with too many workspaces. So you want to keep your workspaces specific enough that you don't end up with like 1,000 of them, but at the same time, you want to keep it general enough. Maybe I got that backwards. But anyway, it's very difficult to find the right level. And I think it also depends on the organization and the team that you're working with. So one thing we like to do is, if everyone here was watching Ankit's talk earlier, you know we operate with squads. So that gives us a really good abstraction to build workspaces around. Each squad is going to have a workspace which has the squad's APIs. So that's how we end up doing it. But it really does depend to a certain degree on the abstractions that you're using within your own organization. I think the best way to figure it out is just to try various things. Like workspaces aren't permanent. If you end up having too many, you can just go ahead and delete a few. And you just have to find that sweet spot.
Yeah, great. Let's see, I think we got a couple more questions. And guys, thanks for all the great participation. We love it. And don't forget to smash that high five in the bottom right. That's how we get our bonuses. Aaron asks, where do monitors run from? Is it local to your computer or on Postman servers?
Oh, it's on the Postman cloud. So I don't think I covered this in detail in the actual demo, but you can actually choose multiple regions to run things from. So for example, if you know that most of your users are based in a particular region, let's say Southeast Asia, you can have your monitor run from Southeast Asia and hit your server wherever it is. At the same time, you can also have it run from multiple regions. So if you have users all over the world, you could theoretically just choose every region there and all of those things would run at the same time and you would get separate results for each of those. So no, it doesn't run locally. It runs on the Postman cloud.
All right. I think that's most of the questions. I see there was one left by Jared, but I saw that got answered. If there are any other questions, actually we saw one more from Thomas come in. Would it be possible to use Postman monitors for internal private APIs?
At this very moment, not quite, but believe me when I say that's like, it's top 3 on my list. That we'll get to it. It'll happen this year.
All right, that's a promise. That's a pinky promise. So next Postman Galaxy, Thomas, I want you to come back and let us know. All right. Any other great questions? Anybody else have anything else they want to ask? Do we want to pet the kitty?
Oh, she's asleep now.
Oh, well, let's not disrupt her. All right. Well, again, thanks to everyone for hanging around on the chat, and thanks for showing up. Vivek, awesome. Great. That was smooth. Like they said, we're going to share the slides as well. Do you know if that'll be separate?
I'm not sure. We'd have to check with like Joyce or someone else.
Okay. Yeah, it may be worth, just because I know Hopin has the aspect ratio is a little hard to read. And so that was a couple of things. So maybe we can try to figure out how to get access to these slides, for anyone who's interested. So yeah, feel free to follow up. Again, thanks for hanging out. We're gonna have a lot more great talks going on throughout the day. So please keep on this track if you want to learn more about the API Dev platform. But thanks, Vivek. Thank everyone. I'm gonna hop off now.
Me too. But you guys can find me like just hanging around if you have any questions. So ciao.